Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. A new report says the UK's over-reliance on fragile supply chains for fertiliser and other farming inputs means it must make contingency plans or break away from the existing treadmill.
This is a big deal. It's not going away, and it's time we actually grasp this nettle and were more biological in our approach to farming.
We'll have more on that a little later. First, all week we've been looking at ideas for cutting emissions on the farm. Today we joined Stuart Oates, a seventh-generation farmer on the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall. He set himself a long-term aim to remove single-use plastics on the farm and end his family's reliance on fossil fuels. Well, towards that goal, he's taken up a Nuffield scholarship, travelling the world to see if the UK can learn from innovations elsewhere to reduce emissions. Fiona Clampin has been to meet him.
So we're just going to fill up the telehandler with fuel. It's actually HVO fuel, which is hydro-treated vegetable oils. So it's just like diesel, except actually it's much cleaner. It runs slightly more efficiently actually and less wear on the engine. But it's made with waste vegetable oils from all over the world actually, they'd come. But this is all brought in here and we use it in all of our tractors. Just got to plug in my tank.
How does it compare cost-wise with red diesel?
It is a little bit more expensive, sort of 7 to 10 pence more per litre. But you've got a 90% reduction in equivalent emissions. So it's a decent drop that I think is worth it.
Tell me about this journey that you've been on. You've been an organic farm, but when did the whole research into fossil fuels start?
Well, we went organic in 1999, and during that time we've always been engaged with all the environmental things we can do and sort of the opportunities around it really. I want things to make sense financially too. And so when it came down looking at solar panels on our houses to start with, it just made financial sense. We did that. And now they've come down in price and we've put them on our buildings too out on the farm. And that makes financial sense. In fact, we've got enough space on our roofs for 300 kilowatts of solar. Now, if all the farms could do that around, it would have an amazing impact. There we go.
Stuart, you've been researching how to lower the emissions on your farm, how to reduce fossil fuel use. What have you seen in other countries? What are other farmers doing?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have been doing enough field. I've gone all over the world and it's looking at whether we can remove fossil fuels from farming in all of their different forms. So the biggest one actually that people don't necessarily realise is fertiliser. To put on 100 kilos of fertiliser onto your land, by the time you've actually made it, put it on, transported it, it's nearly 200 litres of fuel per acre. So fertiliser's the beast that we need to sort out. You know, I found things in Brazil where they're fixing nitrogen in crops which wouldn't normally be fixing nitrogen. Their soy, for example, which, you know, we all see as the devil, actually fixes all of its own nitrogen and 20% for the next crop. So, you know, there's lots of things we can take from other countries and bring over here. And biological controls are another big one. We talk about emissions as the big thing, but actually there are loads of other problems. Microplastics from single-use plastics, all of the forever chemicals which might come out of our pesticides and fungicides. Those are the things which always seem to come back to fossil fuels.
And also very timely at the moment, particularly for fertiliser, looking at the price of that going up and red diesel and so on.
The price of the inputs going into farming now, they're going to kill all profit this year. Let's be blunt about it. We are just fortunate, I suppose, that we happen to be in the right track. We aren't exposed in the way that most people are, and I do feel really lucky about that. But we have to plan for resilience in farming. We don't have any certainty anymore across most of politics, weather, any of it. And so if we can create certainty in energy, reducing our reliance on despot dictators around the world, then, my goodness, it's a no-brainer.
We'll have more on fertiliser in just a moment. That was organic farmer Stuart Oates in Cornwall with Fiona Clampin. Well, we're all being encouraged to follow Stuart's example and reduce our impact on the environment. But what should we do about plastic use? Last week on the programme, we talked about the availability and price of plastic film for silage wrap, which has been affected by the war in the Middle East. Today, we look at what to do with plastics after they've been used. Agriculture Plastics Environment Movement is a not-for-profit organisation set up by Ian Creasy to help farmers recycle their plastic waste. He told me how much farms here recycle at the moment.
In the UK, it's somewhere between about 25 and 30%. If you compare that to Europe, though, it's not a great number. In places like France and Germany and Scandinavia, that number is upwards of 80%. And in Ireland, for example, where they have a government legislated scheme, the recycling rate is at 95% plus. So for the UK, we have quite a long way to go.
What kind of percentage overall of plastics is that?
Yeah, on an overall scale, we're talking relatively small numbers. It's in the sort of 7 to 10% range. Clearly, agricultural plastics is a specialist sector, but within the agricultural plastics sector itself, by far the biggest usage is in silage bale wrap and silage sheeting in areas like that.
And when you're dealing with farmers, what do they tell you are the barriers to recycling plastics on the farm?
Well, there are probably two key ones. One is cost. The cost of having plastic collected off farm lands on the farmer's doorstep. And the other one is actually availability of collectors, in an area which makes it affordable for them to come and pick up the plastic from farm. Some areas of the UK are very well served with plastics collectors. And in other places, it's something of a postcode lottery. And that is exactly what Agriculture Plastics Environment, APE, is trying to resolve. And create a national scheme that works for all farmers and not just those in areas where there is a good collector locally.
How far have you got with that?
As a scheme, we are a not-for-profit, so we are supported and we are financed by both the plastics manufacturers, the largest UK agricultural distributors, machinery manufacturers, and we get a lot of support and help from the likes of the NFU and LEAF, etc. The real solution to this lies also with government, though. The UK has been trying to solve the agricultural plastics recycling problem for 25 years or more. It is clear that when government engages in supporting the process, the rates increase significantly, and that's findings from across Europe. We've got a trial running with Natural Resources Wales, with the Welsh Government in the south of Wales, where we are supporting farmers with a cash incentive for the collection costs, so they pay less for their collection than they wouldn't otherwise normally do. And that is having fantastic results in getting farmers to get their plastic off farm and collected at a higher rate than we've seen in the rest of the UK. So there are solutions to the problem. There is no one silver bullet, unfortunately. But overall, we fundamentally believe that with industry and government working together, and APE acting as a catalyst to bring all of these parties to the table, we can find solutions.
We're all asked to reduce before we recycle. Are farmers reducing the amount of plastic they're using on the farm?
The short answer to that is no. I think farmers are highly environmentally aware, but agricultural plastics plays a vital and currently, to be frank, a role that is not easily transposed to other forms of material. There is a lot of development work going on in terms of alternatives to plastic, and a lot of plastics being used by agriculture now have got 30% plus recycled material into it. But finding genuine alternatives is definitely something that will take time. And the truth is, until that happens, we need to concentrate also on creating an effective collection and recycling structure for the agricultural plastics we're currently using.
Ian Creasy from Agriculture Plastics Environment. Now back to those fertilisers. A new report warns that UK farming's reliance on imported fertiliser and minerals puts it at risk in times of geopolitical stress. Official estimates suggest the UK imports 60% of its nitrogen fertiliser. Other additional minerals come from all over the world. Analysis published by the National Preparedness Commission highlights how quickly global markets can react to instability, underlining the fragility of supply routes which UK agriculture depends on. Professor Tim Lang at the Centre for Food Policy co-authored the report.
We have a serious long-term vulnerability here. The Middle East war is raising, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine before it raised, and all oil crises raised. Basically three problems. We've got uneven production and geographical distribution of where they come from, nitrogen, phosphorus and potash. There's a highly concentrated corporate control. There are also, thirdly, some key geographical choke points. We all know now about the Strait of Hormuz, but with Panama, Gibraltar, Strait of Malacca, the flows of fertiliser across the world are critical for implications for UK resilience. We have low home production, next to no reserves, and a farming and growing model entirely based on artificial fertilisers. It's not a cause of panic, but if this crisis carries on, it could be very serious indeed.
Where do we get our fertiliser from mainly?
Well, nitrogen, biggest producer is China. We get it mostly via Norway. It was Russian gas, as we know. Phosphorus, the biggest producer, again, is China. We get ours mostly from Morocco, but at diverse sources. Potash, the biggest producer in the world, is Canada. We get them from all over the place. The point is there is a squeeze, and Britain has no control over them.
We've heard so much about fertiliser prices and disruption due to the war in Iran. What are the other options for the UK?
There are basically four options. One can talk about stockpiling. Some countries are doing that. You can ignore it and just say, well, market dynamics will go. Nitrogen prices go up by 90%. That knocks on right through the food system. You could try to subsidise it and try and enable farmers and growers to still stay in business. There's huge expense to that. Or you can, the fourth option is you can come off the NPK treadmill, and that most British farming is not interested in. But a large number are now beginning to reduce their reliance by going into a regenerative agriculture or organics. But if that's to be done strategically, it's fundamentally important for land use and what's grown on land, and possibly for food resilience and restructuring. And those are very big issues. It's not going to go away, this vulnerability on and from fertilisers.
Should farmers be thinking about using less or not using artificial fertiliser, making more use of farm waste, food waste, bio waste?
Well, that's the obvious answer. To be absolutely honest, it's a bit like our severe dependency and vulnerability to fossil fuel production. We should be getting off the treadmill is almost certainly what all the data now point to. And that would be difficult. It's not easy to do. You don't just flick a switch and suddenly change a food system. But this is a big deal. It's not going away, and it's time we actually grasp this nettle. And we're more biological and ecological in our approach to farming. And that's not what we've got at the moment. We're trying to bolt on a bit of environmentalism onto a fundamentally fossil fuel dependent system. And that really needs rethinking and some serious strategic honesty with the British public.
If we did turn away from artificial fertilisers, we wouldn't produce enough food, would we? Or could we?
We could produce enough food, but the balance of what is produced and where it goes would change. The big, quick point to make, and it's very complex to actually deliver, is you stop growing vast amounts of grain to then feed to animals who are poor converters. We use land for grain based on artificial fertilisers in a way that is all trying to say this is cheap food. It's not actually cheap. It's vulnerable, it's not resilient, and it has all sorts of implications for ecology and public health and now national security.
Professor Tim Lang. That's all from us this morning. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.